We are going to, as trustees, are going to slide out of the way and hand the first part of this meeting over to the Graham Middle School.
Please stand and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We're going to sing a song for you today called Solly Play. We performed this at our most recent winter concerts, and it's pretty short. We hope that you will join us for our spring concert on March 5th.
Solite, unigenito, Christo Dei Filio, Redemptori Domino, puero loiacenti in praeserpio. Solite, unigenito, Christo Dei Filio, Redemptori Domino, puero loiacenti in praeserpio. Mein kleines Kinderlein, in den Köpfelein, alle lieben Engelein, dienen dem Kinderlein. Sie lieben Engelein, unigenito, Christo Dei Filio, Redemptori Domino, puero loiacenti in praeserpio. Redemptori Domino, puero loiacenti in praeserpio.
until she's working.
Strings. I wanted to thank the Graham Middle School choir students and the Graham Strings students as well for that lovely performance for all of us tonight. Thank you.
That was the most beautiful opening of a school board meeting that I have, as long as I've been on the board and all the meetings I've ever attended, that was amazing.
I think we should start them all that way. Yes, agree.
Agreed.
Thank you.
Thank you. When we talk about showcase for development, and you notice teachers on the sideline, we have a great group of kids. Thank you.
Thank you, Principal Hermosillo. Should I start with the roll call? Although,
you can sit from back there.
okay, so we'll start with roll call.
Laura Blakely.
Ellen Wheeler,
Devin Conley.
Tamara Wilson, and Trustee Gutierrez is in the back of the room. He is present and accounted for. Can I get an approval of the agenda, please?
I have a motion to approve the agenda. Or I move to approve the agenda.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion to approve the agenda passes unanimously on a motion moved by Trustee Blakely and seconded by Trustee Conley. It passes unanimously. So right now it's item 3 on the agenda, opportunity for members of the public to address the board concerning items on the closed session agenda. Are there any members of the public who'd like to speak to the board on closed session agenda items? Seeing as there are none, at 6:08, we will adjourn to closed session. Thank you. All right, at 7:07 PM, I'd like to reconvene the meeting of the Mountain View Wisman School District Board of Trustees. And there were no action was taken in closed session. I'd like to report that out. We did have the time for reconvening this open session at 7:15. So if no one objects, I'd like to maybe discuss item 11 first, which are board updates. In the event we have people from the public who are coming at 7:15 and are not yet here. So do we have any board updates? That's item 11.
I have board updates.
Okay.
So I'm not going to mention the name of the parents, but I met with parents from several schools about future plans between Bolus and Mountain View Wisman School District. There's still a lot of questions about how that's going to work. And I did the best I could to just listen and let them know where we were at this time. But then I also spoke with some Spanish-speaking parents, and by what I hear, some of them are still confused as to why all this is happening. Outside of that, I attended the DLAC meeting last night and also the Therakoff PTA. And I love the energy from the PTA there because they're picking that up off of the principal, and it's vice versa. So they're becoming more engaged. They also liked an idea that I had mentioned to them about, and maybe we can discuss this as a future. I don't know if this would fall in terms of items for future agendas or how the superintendent would want us to handle this, but they seem to like the idea of, because we're at the mid-year point and we have different PTAs that are active and that have different funding capabilities. What if the executive teams for the PTAs could meet once this year or this current trimester? Those that are closest to Crittenden can meet there at the MUR. Those that are closest to Graham can meet here at the MUR. And as they hold their meetings afterwards, they can do breakout sessions for talking about best practices. How do you do outreach? What are the pros and cons of doing certain types of outreach to parents or fundraising? What's hits and what's misses? In other words, have them talk to one another as members of that PTA as a whole at that level. Because when you only have the presidents meet for a breakfast, it's not the same. But when you have active members that are committed to the PTA team, then perhaps they can exchange ideas and help form those bonds cross city, cross schools, so that we can have more of a community perspective and feeling of partnership. And they seem to like that, along with some other PTA members from a couple other schools. But that's what I have for board updates.
So I'll say that is entirely in PTA's hands. We don't, this isn't something that we would get involved in. I think it's a great idea. So, it's nice to hear some vibrant ideas bubbling up.
Thank you.
So I'd like to say a couple things. So I'm looking at my board update that I will send to Ms. Lilga. But speaking of PTAs, it was very interesting. So I went to the monthly Strong Start meeting, which is about collaboration of people working for high quality early childhood education. But I was sitting next to a woman named Diane Foote, and she is highly regarded. She works, she's worked in 6th District PTA for a long time and at the state level. And Michael Jones has been so savvy in working to get the new Jose Antonio Vargas School PTA up and running. And Diane Foote was telling me about, she has gone in with her, vast knowledge of PTA and helping him and the parents over there help form this PTA. So I felt like, we are in really good hands, getting this started. And she was, raving about Michael Jones and raving about Allende Rudolph. So, it's nice to hear that from someone outside who is, who's been to, hundreds of schools. So that's one thing I'd like to say. And the other is I'm looking at this, I Number 7 on my update is communicated extensively with Bonnie Mace to plan the upcoming new board member training to be hosted by Santa Clara County School Board Association and Santa Clara County Office of Education. There are 40 brand new school board members who were elected in Santa Clara County in the fall. So it's going to be, just a packed room. It was originally planned for one room. They moved it to a bigger room. And so that morning, and I think Devin is planning on attending, and, a lot of the other, nearby local school board members that we know, 40 school board members, and there are school districts that are going to be appointing school board members. So it's going to be more than 40 brand new school board members in the county. So we're planning this training on Saturday. We've got, RSVPs from, at least 40 of these new school board members. So we're going to have a superintendent's panel, a school board member panel. Joe Simidian's going to come and talk about how to work effectively with your state legislators. I mean, he's this unique person that, is always willing to help people locally, and he has that experience at, as an assembly person and a state senator. So he's donating his time coming to talk to the new school board members. We've got somebody coming in to talk about the Brown Act, an attorney coming in to talk about the Brown Act. So it's going to be a great event, and just looking forward to it.
Thank you. Any other board updates?
Just a very quick one. I think most of us were at the swearing in of the new city council members on Monday evening.
Mm-hmm.
And I got a chance to thank, is it council member Simidian? I still want to, for his support for the new playground at Landell for the medically fragile students.
Supervisor.
It's supervisor. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I always want to call him senator.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I'm
Or
very
board
happy about that.
president,
I know that we thanked him at the last meeting, but I just want to say I had an opportunity to do that personally. So excited about that coming in 2020.
Yes. Thank you. Any other updates?
So something that I'm working on figuring out, and I haven't picked a date yet, but my goal is to have a monthly tea with a trustee, an opportunity at a local coffee shop or park or other location where members from the public can come and I can hear from them if they're unable to make board meetings or other events that we have. And so once I start settling on dates for that, I'll figure out how to get that information out there so people from the public who might not feel comfortable reaching out in other formats have an opportunity to talk with the trustee.
So is that something that you're going to be doing by yourself? You're going to be opening up dates, asking others of us to come to these too?
If other board members are interested in doing so, I think it would be a wonderful opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
So is that more of an item for future agenda? Is that something that we would discuss then? Or how would we approach that? Because I know this was brought up before with Greg a few months back, and then we stopped. So
My sense is that it's in kind of an in-between area.
Yeah.
I think any trustee could do it, and we could do it informally.
Just as long as we run
Or we could, have it be an official thing. I'm comfortable, with the way that Devin was describing.
I am as well. Yeah. Formal is fine. And if you'd like to open it up to one other trustee per date, that would be great if that's something you're amenable to.
That sounds wonderful.
All right.
That'd be
Great. Thank you.
I'll do coffee, not tea, though.
So how about coffee with Jose, coffee with?
Just hang out with Jose. Yeah, we'll go to the coffee shop and just hang out.
Okay. Should we move on to back to the 7:15 timeframe, and we can handle the other items since we are now at 7:20. So we are at the consent agenda. The following items will be handled with one action. However, any item may be removed from consideration by individual board members or the superintendent.
You know, I have a question about that, and I'm wondering who can help me with the question. It's regarding the notice of completion. So it would be items O, P, and Q.
Okay.
And my question would be, when I read the fiscal implication for all of them, it basically says the district will release the retention amount provided all remaining closeout and punch list items have been completed. So my question was, what does that exactly mean? What are the closeout and punch list items? Is it for that?
All those from consent?
Is it that from that particular school's closeout and punch list items, or from the Measure G overall closeout and punch list items?
I'd recommend that perhaps you pull that from consent if you want to discuss those, because Dr. Clark and Dr. Rudolph aren't here this evening. So if you want to ask a question, it might be appropriate. If we don't need to, Barty, do we need to approve that today, or could it happen in 2 weeks?
I don't know.
Ms. Geis.
I know that there's some timelines attached to those items. So would it be possible if we can keep them on and then have the response provided to the board in an email? Or it's just that it'll hold up the process for these 3 items?
I'm
I'm
for it.
fine. I just,
Yeah. If
Trustee
we can do
Gutierrez
that-
was asking a
Is that
question,
right?
and I don't, does anybody,
If we can do that,
Here.
we should be fine. I mean, as long as we have that opportunity, that would be great.
Oh, perfect.
Okay.
Oh, could you please come to the
Come on
podium?
up.
Thank you so much.
My name's Sarah Feeler. I'm the district auditor. So I apologize. I haven't read what's on the consent agenda, but I can kind of speak to your question a little bit. The closeout is for that specific project, not Measure G as a whole. Yeah,
Thank you.
sure. No
Thank
problem.
you.
That was quick. Well, having said that, I don't have a need to remove those items from the consent agenda.
Okay.
So I move that we pass the consent agenda as presented.
second?
Okay. Okay, on a motion moved by Trustee Gutierrez and seconded by Trustee Blakely, all those in favor?
Aye.
All those against? Okay, the motion to approve the consent agenda passes unanimously. The next item is item 7, communications. Are there any members from employee organizations who would like to speak to the board this evening? Seeing as there are none, we have item B, district committees. Are there any representatives from district committees who'd like to address the board?
Would that be the appropriate time for the league?
No.
No,
It
okay.
would be items on
Oh,
on the
okay.
agenda.
Seeing as there are none, and the next is superintendent, seeing as
We have no
there is
superintendent.
none here present. We'll move on to community comments. This is the time reserved for community members to address the board on items not on the agenda. The board and administration welcome this opportunity to listen. However, in compliance with the Brown Act, the board is not permitted to take action on non-agenda items. Speakers are requested to complete a speaker card and state their name for the record. If there are additional comments after 10 minutes have elapsed, this item may be continued after all action and discussion items are completed. And we have one comment card from Sue Graham.
Good evening. My name is Sue Graham. I'm president of the League of Women Voters of the Los Altos Mountain View area. And I just wanted to share with you that Bill Lambert will be the League's observer. Will be attending your school board meetings and reporting back to us important things, items, issues that you're addressing. Devin Conley has done that for the past year and done a wonderful job, but now she sits among you. So we found a new observer. So I have given your administrative assistant the contact information for Bill so that you can give him information, make sure he has board agendas and that sort of thing. Thank you very much for letting us come and watch your meetings.
I have a question, if you don't mind. I understand
Absolutely.
Honorable Bill Lambert's in the crowd. May he approach the podium so I can ask him a quick question?
Sure.
He's like, no.
You're getting your board president hat on.
Honorable Bill Lambert, being that Devin had been in this spot a year before and then now she's amongst us, is that your similar plan as well?
No comment.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you for your service, Bill.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mrs. Graham. Okay, well, we're going to move on to item 9, review and action. The first item is calendar for the 2019-2020 school year. And we have Ms. Geisel.
Good evening. The school calendar for the 1920 school year is obviously a negotiated item with MVEA, the Mountain View Education Association. We met together in a committee comprised of district leadership as well as MVA representatives, and it's been reviewed by district leadership. And I also must say that it matches exactly the Mountain View Los Altos High School district breaks. And I am recommending, staff recommends that the board approve the 1920 school year calendar as presented.
All right, are there any questions on the calendar?
No, once again, I'll just say I'm glad it matches the high school. It makes vacation planning for families so much easier.
Yes, agreed.
I figured out their process, so I'm going to make sure that we're on top of it next year.
Thank you. Any comments on the calendar?
Do we know when graduation ceremonies are going to be?
For the high school district
No,
or
for
no, for
ours.
us? Well, we were just talking about that. I believe that we're looking at the last day of the trimester, which would be June 5th for the ceremonies. And then we were discussing the timeline as far as the time. We haven't quite made any final decisions yet, but we will definitely be getting back to you about that.
All right, then do I have a motion?
I move that the board approve the 2019-2020 school year calendar as presented.
I second.
Okay, on a motion moved by trustee Gutierrez and seconded by trustee Conley. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any against? Okay, the motion passes unanimously. And the next item is board resolution number 01-011019 for change of date of school holiday. You have Mrs. Geisel again?
So I'm supposed to do that one as well. And that is a change of day of the school holiday for Lincoln Day. Yes. So Lincoln Day will originally be on, what day is this? The February 12th. So that's traditionally the day, but we're moving it to, I think it's the 18th. Thank you. So we're recommending that the board approve the change from the 12th of February to the 19th of February for Lincoln Day or President's Day.
And that gives a full week
A
off.
long weekend,
Yeah.
yes. And the start of our winter break as well.
Okay. Any questions from the board or comments? Okay, can I get a motion, please?
I move that the board adopt resolution number 01-011019, change of date of school holiday as presented.
Second.
Okay, on a motion moved by trustee Blakely and seconded by trustee Gutierrez. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Item 9C, approval of Government Code Section 54960.2, Brown Act commitment.
Is that you again, Carmen?
I think that might be.
Yeah, because it has Dr. Rudolph on it.
From
Steve.
the hard copy, yeah. I think
We
you
can
would
just
be more-
read
It's pretty extensive.
what's in the agenda.
This could just be that.
We can just read what's in the
Read what's
agenda,
on
right?
here?
Yeah.
Okay. I can.
Right. Basically, we received a letter from a member of the community alleging that there was a Brown Act violation on a board agenda in April, and this is in response to that. So if you decide to approve this, you'll basically be saying that we agree to abide by the Brown Act and we will not violate the Brown Act in the future.
And basically the idea was that we had an item that said negotiations and we had not fully vetted that out on what that meant and what we were actually
Correct.
discussing. It was just an oversight issue. Nothing
Correct.
More.
Okay.
And who presented the letter?
Weren't we following council's advice when we did it that way? And we have now consulted with council again and they have updated their advice to us so that we have slightly more specific phrasing on the agenda.
Correct.
So the letter was written by Steve Nelson, retired Mountain View Wisman School District trustee.
Correct.
Thank you, Madam President.
Okay. Do we have any questions or comments on this item? Seeing as there are none, do I have a motion?
I move that the board unconditionally commits that it will cease, desist from, and not repeat the challenged past action as described.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
I abstain.
And one abstention. Okay. Okay, on a motion moved by trustee Blakely and seconded by trustee Wheeler, we approve the government code section 54960.2 Brown Act commitment with one abstention from trustee Gutierrez. All right, the next item is item 10, review and discussion, which is the 2017-2018 financial audit report. Presented by Sarah Feiler. Feeler.
And I can use the PowerPoint here.
Yes,
Okay, great.
thank you.
Great. My name's Sarah Feeler. I'm a director with Christie White Associates, the independent auditors for Mountain View Wisman School District. It's my pleasure to be here this evening to present the audit report for the district for the year ended June 30, 2018, as well as the Measure G audit report. So I will go through presentation here. Okay, great. So to start, I'll be going through the district's annual audit report. So just to kind of start off, related to the audit report, there are some responsibilities of the district related to the audit and the conduct of the operations of the district during the year. So the district is responsible for the effective, developing effective internal controls. The district is also responsible for the financial statements. Financial statements are the district's, and the district is responsible for preparing and managing the budget during the year. The auditor, or CWA, Christie White Associates, responsibility is to issue an opinion as to the reasonable assurance of the financial statements that they are materially correct. We issue an opinion. Our opinion, however, does not address the financial condition of the district. However, if the district did have a going concern issue, that would be addressed in the audit report. And we issued an unmodified opinion. That is our independent auditor's report, which is the best opinion that can be issued. And here is an excerpt from page 2 of the report. It's also the page 2 of the independent auditor's report that makes note that our opinion of the financial statements present fairly in all material respects the respective financial position of Mountain View Wisman for the year ended June 30, 2018. And again, the best opinion that can be issued. We also review internal controls for the district. And we did not note any material weaknesses. However, we did note a significant deficiency as audit finding 2018-1. And this related to the student body account.
Oh, right.
We also issued an opinion over federal compliance, and in this we issued an unmodified opinion. Our testing for 2017-18 covered the child nutrition cluster, and we did not note any significant deficiencies nor any material weaknesses. There were no findings related to federal compliance. And over state awards, listed here in the chart provided are the various state compliance areas that we test during our annual audit. That includes, just for a few examples, attendance, instructional time, instructional materials, the ACES program, educator effectiveness, unduplicated pupil count, just for a few examples. We again issued an unmodified opinion, which is the best opinion that can be issued. We did note a significant deficiency as finding 2018-2, and this was related to classroom teacher salaries and the minimum percentage that the district is required to meet. The district did issue a waiver for this finding, and there were no material weaknesses identified. All right, and that concludes my presentation related to the district audit report. And before I move on to the bond audit report, are there any questions that I might be able to answer?
Yes, you just suggested that the district issued a waiver for that statute that requires us to spend 60% on classroom
Yes.
teacher salary. We issue the waiver, or the county issues the waiver?
I believe the process is that the district issues the waiver to be approved by the county. This is an area where we have seen more frequently districts are having findings of this nature, and a waiver is often issued just to kind of mitigate the finding.
Well, and I know that we had the same deficiency in our audit last year, and there was a waiver. And last year I think we were at 57.49%. This year we're at 58.88%.
Yes,
so
very
we've
close.
improved by 1.39%, which is more than half. So we're getting
Making
close.
progress, exactly.
And so it's your experience that many other districts also fall a little bit short of the 60%.
Yes, and we have some other districts that we work with in Santa Clara County that have had similar issues, similar findings. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. And now I'll move on to the audit report for the bond for Measure G. And the audit that we conduct and the report that we issue is a financial and a performance audit. And first, when we begin our audit, we do review the, actually this begins the report and also our procedures. We review the activities of the Citizens Oversight Committee. So we verify that the district has in fact established a committee. There's the required number of members and representation on that committee. We also review the frequency of the meetings that are held during the year, that is in line with the maturity of the program. A very mature program would have many meetings. A program that might be kind of winding down or just starting may have fewer meetings. We also verify that the district is issuing the report to the Oversight Committee at a very similar or same time that it is being provided to the board. And we also verify that the Oversight Committee is issuing an annual report, of which Mountain View is doing all of those correctly. Okay, and just in issuing our financial opinion over Measure G, one of the objectives is that we are reviewing the financial statements to examine that the financial statements and the accompanying disclosures are accurate, and that we attest to the fairness of the presentation of the financial statements and the related disclosures. And just to make note, the report for Measure G, we are issuing an opinion only related to the Measure G rather than the district as a whole for this report. And so listed on the screen that you can see on page 4 of the audit report is where we issue our opinion over the financial statements. The composition of the opinion paragraph is very similar to the district audit, and that we are issuing an opinion that the financial statements of Measure G are presented fairly in all material respects for the year ended June 30, 2018. And in this, we are issuing, again, an unmodified opinion related to the financial audit. And just as an excerpt, some of the procedures that we go through to reach our financial statement opinion, and these are what we call substantive procedures. For cash, we review cash and county treasury statements at June 30, 2018 to verify that the cash is stated correctly. For accounts receivable and accounts payable, we're confirming the balances that are stated on the financial statements. And we're also viewing transactions that have happened after the fiscal year to see that items are being recorded in the proper year. For revenue, we're typically viewing interest statements during the year, interest that has been earned. And for expenses, this is the most extensive procedure that we perform for both the financial audit and the performance audit. We're reviewing those expenditures to make sure that they are properly approved and are appropriate uses of Measure G funds. And so our objective over the performance audit is that we are auditing prescribed procedures and making sure that the district is in compliance with those procedures. So for our performance audit, again, an area that we test in the financial audit and in the performance audit are expenditure testing. So we tested 32.5 million, or 38% of the total project-related expenditures, and we separately view personnel-related expenditures, to which we tested over 140,000, or 51% of the personnel expenditures. For our facility site walk, this is my favorite part of a bond audit. We get to get out of the office, go actually to the sites and see all the great work that is coming to fruition using the bond funds. So we toured Castro Elementary and the various projects that were being done during 17-18. And we also viewed Stevenson Elementary and the projects that were either completed or in process during 17-18. Also, some additional procedures that we perform for the performance audit, we view bidding procedures and change order procedures, to which for bidding, we viewed the processes in place over the Stevenson site work, Stevenson Electric, and Stevenson multipurpose room library project. And for change orders, we viewed change orders that were executed related to the Castro Elementary project and Montaloma. And to conclude our report on performance, we issued, again, an unmodified opinion. And this states that, in our opinion, based on the field work that I've described, the district has complied with the requirements of Measure G. And in this, we did not note any material weaknesses nor any significant deficiencies related to internal controls. So again, a great audit year for both the district audit and the bond audit. And just to conclude, I'd like to thank management and all the staff that we work with during our audit. Management and staff are always ready for our audit and prepared for the audit, which makes it go very smooth on our end, very transparent. And everyone that we work with, from staff at the sites to staff at the district, has been very helpful with the audit process. So it's worth noting to let the board know that. So if there are any questions related to the bond audit, I'd be happy to answer those.
Do you have any questions?
I just wanted to double back to the other audit, but go ahead with the bond.
No, I want to make a comment, which I really appreciate the visual words and you saying it out loud that this is the best. What did you say? The best
opinion
outcome, opinion possible.
Yes.
Because often we'll get reports and it says, what is it? Unmodified. And, just, if you're not an accountant, you don't know what that means. So I really appreciate you using layperson's terms on that. And, so it helps it look good.
And I just wanted to ask, I'm sorry, I keep following up.
Sure.
And I know that the language of audit is very formulaic. So there were those two significant deficiencies in the first one, not the bond one. One relating to not spending 60% or more
correct
on classroom teacher salaries. The second one relating to ASB
yes
accounting or cash. And I know they're not material weaknesses, which is delightful, but those two issues have come up in prior years. And I already pointed out the one for the 60%, and they don't seem like critical things, but I know we've done training, we've tried to mitigate and remediate, and we're doing more training for the ASB ones. But at some point, if those same little, I'm going to call them little deficiencies, keep coming up, does that create larger issues going, if there are multiple years?
It does not. With each of these findings, there isn't a question cost associated with it. So if there was a question cost that maybe would require the district to pay back a certain portion or lose funding in a certain portion, those have a little bit, more of an impact because there is a fiscal impact. The findings that are presented in the audit report to kind of be a significant deficiency, it's that, we feel that they should be brought to management's attention, brought to those charged with governance, the board's attention. We do look that there's, been improvement. And so there, with ASB, sometimes there's improvement and then there is staff personnel and things, things of that nature. So we do keep that in mind as we're reviewing it as we're determining if it should be a finding or not. Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure.
So I have a question. So in terms of the ASB issue, so what is the exact issue?
Sure. Yeah, I'd be happy to go into it in a little bit more detail. Let me just pull the report up in front of me.
But it's something about there
So with the
wasn't.
ASB, of course, there are 5 kind of issues that were noted. One of which is that 10 out of 10 of the deposits that we tested was lacking adequate support. So that doesn't mean that there was no support attached with the deposit, but it's not quite detailed enough. So we're looking to see that we could see a sales report so we could, be given more assurance that whatever was collected at that fundraising event, made it into the bank in its entirety. So that piece is kind of missing and needs a little bit of improvement. And then the other is 1 out of 10 of the disbursements or checks that was written did not have proper approval from the student body treasurer and the student body advisor. With a middle school ASB that operates as an organized ASB, they're required to have 3 signatures for purchases that are going to be made to approve those purchases. So there was an administrator approval, but not the student council, which is one of the great things about the student body. They're very involved in the activity. So that was one piece that was missing. This appears to me to be an isolated incident, as it was just one of those transactions. And then kind of some improvement on some of the record keeping in terms of constitutions for active clubs that are doing fundraising and keeping meeting minutes of those kind of financially active clubs so that activity is documented. And any equipment that's being purchased using ASB funds, and inventory should be kept for those. So that year to year, there's no equipment that's being purchased and somehow, walking away.
So a procedural question based on all those explanations, I think would be then at that point, what's been done is this has been presented to the school district. Those findings from those particular instances at those schools are then notified, and then there's a process in place to correct them.
Exactly. And you'll see the district has provided a corrective action plan, which includes providing a training to staff members. And in past years, I've presented some trainings to staff members as well, kind of going over those procedures related to ASB. So the district does have great corrective actions in place. And I think with the help of the district office, that those findings will be corrected or improved upon. Yeah.
And so finally, our friends from the student council will be given guidance as to how to proceed the next time they try and issue a check.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Checks and balances.
Yes, exactly.
Right. Thank you.
Are there any questions from the public on this item? I didn't see any comment cards that I would. Okay. You got none. Thank you so much, Mrs. Feeler,
Thank you
for your presentation and
Thank you.
and hard work. I appreciate it. The next item up is the Mountain View Westman School District results for the California dashboard. We have Mrs. Bauer.
Good evening. I am here tonight to give you an overview of the results of the California dashboard, which went public in December. So as you know, or you may know, our dashboard is new. This will be the 3rd time we're actually going to actually see performance categories in different areas. And the nice thing in California is now we have one system. The dashboard incorporates both state accountability and the federal accountability. And as you might know, in the past, we had Academic Performance Index API, and then we also had Adequate Yearly Progress, which was federal. So now instead of 2, we have 1. And the purpose of the dashboard is really to give stakeholders and the public information on district and school progress. And the dashboard is different from previous because it looks at multiple measures as opposed to just academics. So the dashboard is comprised of both state and local indicators. State indicators have data that is provided by the state. Local indicators are locally measured. Our local indicators, you can see here, really look at basic services, conditions of learning, how we're implementing the state standards, parent engagement, school climate, and new this year was broad course of study. Locally, districts are required, there's a rubric, there's different ways that you can self-report. Districts are required to measure their own progress and then share the results with the Board of Trustees. And we came to you on October 4th, and we did share with you how we measured our progress on local indicators, and we were met in all areas. The state indicators look at academics, language arts, and math, suspensions, English learner progress, chronic absenteeism, and then there's graduation rate and college and career indicator, which are not reported for elementary districts. For state indicators, the state has created grids, and on the grid represents status and change. So you look at your progress and then the change in your progress. Did you go up? Did you stay the same? Did you maintain? Did you go down? And based on these status and change grids, you get assigned a performance category that's represented by a color. You have to have 2 years of data in order to get a performance category. This is a sample. This is chronic absenteeism. And in chronic absenteeism, like suspensions, you want to have low scores and you want to be declining because we want all of our kids to be at school. We don't want them suspended and we don't want them absent. On our other indicators like academic progress, you want to see high scores and you want to be increasing. The state created these by taking the results of whatever it was they were looking at, and they ordered everything from highest to lowest, and then they established cut points. And then the cut points help define the categories that each district or school or subgroup falls into. And we see a little change this year. While we have all of our cut points, and the cut points are supposed to remain in place for several years, the state actually made changes last year. This year they've stayed the same, but they've changed the visual representation. Last year we had kind of that pie thing with the same colors. This year we have a gauge. And for performance categories, anybody or any school or district or student group with 30 or more students will actually get a performance color or a category. If we have groups between 12 and 29 students, you can see on the dashboard the progress of that group. It won't get a color, but you can see if they declined or maintained or increased. And if there's fewer than 11 students, you won't see any data for privacy purposes. And just so you can see, you may have looked at this already. They've changed. They spent quite a bit of time revamping the dashboard from last year. This is the home page. They wanted to make it easier to view and navigate. This is our landing page. This is just a snapshot of what you see when you log in for Mountain View Wisman. You can see our ratings in all the different areas, both local and state. And then this is what it looks like for the different performance indicators. There's a different kind of card that they call it, where you can see how we've done. Are we above standard? Did we decrease? Did we maintain? How did we do as a district? As well as a snapshot of where our subgroups are in the different colors. And then you can move down into student group details, and you can see how our student groups are. We have 10 total student groups, and you can see how they're doing and who falls into which category. This is a snapshot of English language arts, and this is a snapshot of math, and we'll talk more about that as we dig into the presentation. So chronic absenteeism. So chronic absenteeism has to do with how much a student has been in school, and it includes excused, unexcused, and suspension. So it's very different from truancy, which really is about unexcused absences. Chronic absenteeism is all about how much you were in school, and if you are absent 10% of the days, then you're considered chronically absent. This is the first year that we're getting ratings. So you can see our chronic absenteeism performance here. Something I want you to think about, or just keep in the back of your mind, there is a new law. So we have, when students enroll in our district, they must remain on our books and enrolled until we know that they've enrolled in another district. So this could affect some of our data. Because if a parent pulls their child, we have to keep marking them absent until we know where they are. And that sometimes takes time. It can take 10 days, it can take 2 days. It's difficult, but that is something new. Just some data trends as we looked at the different ratings. We are overall green, but where it's more interesting to look is into our subgroups. And we do have a subgroup in red, which is the lowest score. Our homeless population is considered chronically absent. When you look at our schools, most of our schools are blue or green, with the exception of Mistral and Bub, which have yellow and orange ratings respectively. And we have some of our English learners at some of our sites have orange ratings. So we need to find out why some of our most needy students aren't coming to school. For suspensions, the way the state counts suspensions is if you were in our district and in a school and you're suspended at that school, say 5 times, you're only counted once. If you're in our district and you go to 3 different schools and you're suspended at each school gets 1 count. So they don't count the total number of days suspended or number of suspensions. It's a one-time count. And if you went online and looked at the 5x5 grids, you'd see that there's 6 different sets of grids because you're rated on suspension depending on what type of district you are and or what type of school you are. So those cut points and what that looks like it varies. So for suspension, we have 3 years of data. So you can see where we started in 2016 in the spring and where we are now. The district as a whole has maintained an overall rating of green. And, you know, for the most part, our suspensions, we've really maintained or improved our ratings with the exception of African American and English learners. We have some schools, Therakoff has a yellow rating for suspensions. And what was interesting in the data is our elementary schools have blue ratings for Hispanic Latino students in suspensions, but our middle schools have lower ratings with yellow or orange. So definitely work that we need to explore as we look at our different subgroups. English learner progress, because we've just transitioned to the LPAC, there's no performance color this year. We only have 1 year of data. And so this is what you get, and I know that Ms. Smith has presented this information to you earlier. It just gives kind of an overview of how our students did on the LPAC in the spring. So we'll look forward to having a color indicator next year. We did look a little bit of data to try to see kind of where our district was in comparison with the state and the county. We noticed that we are higher than the state of California with the percentage of students that scored the highest level on the LPAC, and we're pretty at the same level with the number of English learners that scored at a level 1 as the state. And you can see Stevenson, Huff, and Landals have the highest percentage of students who scored a level 4, and Stevenson and Mauna Loma have the smallest percentages of students scoring at the lowest level, a level 1. Academic indicator, this is language arts and math, and this is a little bit of a change from last year. So last year it was called distance from level 3 or DF3. Now they're calling it distance from standard, DFS. It's really the same thing, just a change in language. And so they compare students' assessment score to the lowest possible score to achieve level 3, which is standard met. And so once they compare every student's score to that lowest score in every grade level, and then they average that to produce a school level and a district level or a student group average score. This is just an example. You can see how they calculate DFS, which I want to say DF3. I can't get the change out of my head. And new this year is participation rate. So the federal government, through the Every Student Succeeds Act, has a requirement that student groups, schools meet the 95% participation rate. 95% of students take the CASP or the CAA alternative assessments. And so as long as a student logs on to the computer adaptive test or the performance task, they're considered as participating. And with our ESSA plan, with our state plan, if we have student groups or schools that do not meet the participation requirement, then it affects a school's DFS rate. So they can be docked, essentially. So this is just a sample of how they do it. They compare DFS, they look at participation rate, they have a formula, which is they multiply by a quarter, and then they reduce the rate by a certain number of points. The interesting piece for this is it's not explicitly noted on the dashboard. So you don't know just by looking at it if you had a participation rate fall below 95%. It is included in the supplementary and backup material. So we were able to see we did not have any school or student group that was affected by participation rate. So looking at academic indicator language arts, we have only 2 years to show because the cut points were changed last year. So we can't compare 2016 to 17 and 18 because it's different. You can see we have some changes in trends. We have some greens and blues, but we also have some oranges and reds. So while the district as a whole remains green and we have a status of high and we've made some increases, we have students, our most needy students, our English learners, our socioeconomically disadvantaged, homeless, and Hispanic Latino students still have orange ratings. So we did not make enough progress with them last year. And now we have students with disabilities with a rating of red. At the school level, all of our schools have overall ratings of blue or green except Castro. We've had some significant increases in some of our scores at some of our schools, notably Therakoff, Stevenson, Montaloma, and Landals. We have some sites where we haven't seen growth with subgroups in 2 years. Socioeconomically disadvantaged students, Hispanic Latino students at Graham and Crittenton continue to have orange ratings. And again, our students with disabilities are struggling at our middle schools. Math is a similar picture. Some greens and blues, but also some oranges, and some changes from year to year with our homeless students going up from orange to yellow. Again, it's kind of a similar story to language arts. We're really struggling still with our English learners, our SED, and our Hispanic Latino students at some of our sites and district-wide. So bear with me for support systems because this is very new and I'm still learning it as I go. So now, in the past, with the accountability systems we had program improvement. Program improvement, if you didn't make the right progress, came with a lot of strings, a lot of things that schools had to do. Now California has 2 different systems of support. They have California levels of support, and then they have comprehensive and targeted support and improvement, which is a requirement from the federal government and the Every Student Succeeds Act. So in California, any LEA or any district is eligible for support because they want districts to take advantage of the supports that the state, the CDE, and the counties provide. And last year, districts and schools were identified. This year, they've added the local indicator data, which can, if you don't meet your local indicators, can put you into a need of support. And county offices will be identified this year for the first time. The levels of support in California, level 1 is support for all. So there's workshops, professional development, coaching from different departments in the CDE. There's differentiated assistance, which is support for identified performance issues, especially significant disparities in performance among subgroups. And county offices of education will contact districts and schools in January if any of our sites are eligible for differentiated support. Level 3 intensive intervention would be if you had not improved student group performance over a specific time period. That time period has not been defined. These are the criteria for technical assistance. They're based on the different priority areas, and you can see the different ways that you can fall into the need of differentiated assistance. And I will say, differentiated assistance, the county works with the school or the site on a plan. They look at what's happening, and then really the plan for how to improve is carried out through the local control accountability plan and the school plan for student achievement. That is the way, or the vehicle for improvement in the new system. There's no more forced movement. Can't ask you to move kids from school to school because of performance, which happened in the past. They can't force you to use money to pick from certain providers to do tutoring. It's really about what plan are you going to come up with and how are you going to carry that out through local control to make improvements. So the second system of support in California is comprehensive support and improvement. And there are 3 categories for this as well. And this was identified through the Every Student Achieves Act. So you have the first one, which is CSI, or Comprehensive Support and Improvement, which looks at school-wide performance. And to qualify here, this really looks at the lowest performing 5% of Title I schools, and then it looks at high school graduation rates. Then you have Targeted Support and Improvement, TSI, which looks at student group performance. And so it looks at schools with consistently underperforming student groups. And then you have Additional Targeted Support and Improvement, ATSI, which is again looking at student group performance. And that looks at schools that are already identified under TSI that need even more support. It's a lot. So the criteria for CSI are comprehensive, which is school-wide. For Title I schools, you can see the criteria. It really is looking at schools that are really struggling and have all red and some orange indicators. And CSI schools are identified once every 3 years. So you get identified and then you work on a plan to make gains and move forward. Although California is proposing to do another round of comprehensive support identification in 2019. We will have to wait and see. They take this up at the January state board meeting. Yeah. TSI, any school now can be identified for targeted student support, not just Title I schools. And so this is when you have student groups that have dashboard ratings and they've had data for 2 years, but now they're meeting the same criteria that you just saw for identifying Title I schools. So these are schools that have all red and orange ratings, and mostly red. And these schools will be identified this year. And for TSI, schools are identified every year. But they're still discussing this and they're still working out all the details. And then you have additional targeted student support, ATSI. Again, any school, not just Title I schools. And this is when you have a school already identified for TSI, and then you have a student group, another one that's performing at or below the level of the schools in CSI. So it's just another level of support. ATSI is done every 3 years. Every 3 years. So just a little more information. If a school is not identified for comprehensive support, they're still eligible for another category. You can't be in all 3 categories at the same time. You're only in one. And you can exit annually. So if you make progress and you do a great job and you improve your status and change, then out you go the following year. And like I mentioned, the LCAP and the single plan for student achievement are the school improvement process. There's not a prescribed plan. It's really not clear, at least the last time we talked to the county, how these systems meld together. When we asked the question, I was given the answer of that's a good question. So based on what we've looked at, you can see we have a few concerns looking at schools that have had no growth for 2 years with certain subgroups. And these are areas that we really need to focus on moving forward. Okay, so we have a plan of action. And at this point, I've talked a lot. And the dashboard covers all these different indicators and all these different departments. So I'm going to bring up Carmen, Ms. Geisels, who's going to talk about chronic absenteeism and suspensions because that's in her side of the house.
So our school sites are including a chronic absenteeism climate goal and action plan in each of their site plans. And we are working together at leadership team meetings between leadership. We look at our absentee reports every single month. And we discuss that by demographic, by right down to the student, by each site. And we review that. And we have really pretty good attendance so far. It's about, as of today, a 98.57% attendance rate. So we're really fortunate in the fact that what we're doing and what school sites are doing is really working. For example, we have school principals who do site visits on Thursdays with their SCEFs. They have newsletter reminders. They have connecting with their students through parent engagement activities. We have some schools that do core values of attendance and why it's important to attend. So it's always in the forefront of whatever our site principals in our schools do. We will continue to partner with outside community agencies. We are concerned about the homeless aspect of attendance and how we can work with that. We're working with Ms. Smith's department. We have someone who is a liaison who's working specifically with those students and working together to bring them in. So we continue to do that as far as chronic absenteeism is concerned. We look at right down to the kid. What's going on if we have to have a student study team. We have yet to have a student attendance review board yet this year. We've been fortunate. We are looking at sending out letters in January for those students who are chronically absent and as well as truant. But that's a big focus that we've always had, and we've been very fortunate as far as our practices and what our principals are doing at their school sites. And as far as suspension, that's also my side of the house as well. We are looking at what we're doing as far as alternatives to suspension. What can we do in place of that? What can we do in lieu of suspending? Again, our school sites they do behavior shaping plans. We have that at one of our school sites. They have connections to Project Cornerstone. I know our principals who do the home visits make a connection with the student at school and brings it to the house. So I think it's about building those relationships proactively before it becomes punitive. There's action alerts. We have one school site who does that, who will say, hey, this is happening, it's getting kind of out of hand. So there's a lot of proactive pieces. We're also going to continue to look at our leadership team meetings, alternatives to suspension. What more can we do? What else can we do? We have only had one serious issue this year, and we've been able to work with the parents in finding a way to develop a contract for the student. And it's been very successful so far. So we will continue to monthly monitor discipline and attendance every single month. So they know that's coming. They know that we're looking at that as a whole. As far as our demographic data, we are concerned about some of the students when they get to middle school, what's happening. So we're looking at that at Graham and Crittenden, and we have been in close contact with our administrators and really a case-by-case basis on what we can do. And they put in a lot of time with parents, with engagement, with interviews, with just interactions and intervening. So a lot of it is open dialogue and really trying to follow through with some processes in lieu of that. And very briefly, the CalPAD law is changing. Typically, CalPADS feels now that we have to enter everything, even if it's not just a suspension, a discipline issue as well, and we have to cite what we're doing. So we have to document. If it's a conference with a parent, that's an alternative. So I will be working with the principals and the school community engagement facilitators in 2 weeks at the next leadership team meeting to talk about the new laws and what we can do to document that. So.
Good evening. Our next subgroup, which falls under my team under Ed Services is our English Language Learner Progress. And what are we doing? Well, as you can see, for the last 2 years, we're in year 2 of SIOP implementation. Outlined in the grid, and I do want to commend the efforts of our site leaders, is that with implementation, although we're in year 2, there's been a concerted effort to continue the work done in year 1, right? So we wanted to be sure that with this implementation, that it's not, I learned that last year, that bag of tricks stays where it is. No, we're continuing to build upon that. And the site leaders are doing an excellent job of managing those pieces, messaging to the teachers of how to keep all the components from prior implementation and still embrace new learning to support our English learners. As you can see, our focus has been background, lesson preparation, the planning components, and then student interactions. The more students talk and use the language, hear the modeling by our more able learners with the English language in the classrooms as models, the more that they're going to grasp the language. And then finally, many of our sites are looking at the different strategies to employ to be able to help students have access to the content, where we will hope to see increased achievement on those SBAC scores. Also, as you can note, you can see the other pieces and components at sites, your school and community engagement facilitators, your at-risk supervisors. They all have those lists of target students that they're specifically following, whether it's during the course of the day, which would be our at-risk supervisors with proactive support in and outside of the classrooms, as well as our school and community engagement facilitators with supporting the home piece and any parent education. And then we kind of round that out at the district level, connecting with our site ELACs at DLAC, which Trustee Jose Gutierrez mentioned earlier this evening. We're really proud that we did face some brutal facts from last year's data, and Kathy Bauer has been pointing out that we needed to take a look at our English language learners differently, and that they each come with a different story. And one group within our subgroup is our reclassified English students that we could not ignore the slippage in their achievement. So we included that sites would have within their site plans the reclassified student site plan goal, not just English learners who are currently. And the sites are doing really well with that and following up with their plans, in addition to continually monitoring the long-term English language learners and their current kiddos, which would be in that board goal EL1 that we do talk about. One piece that's come back to the table is our English learner monitoring. We did notice we did not conduct that and follow through with that with fidelity over the years. Arlene Siam did a wonderful job of updating with the LPAC scoring and training and talking with principals of how to use catch-up plans to determine where should students be based on their first year of English, second, third, and fourth, and then sites were to determine whether the students are behind where we anticipate within the reasonable term of how and when we acquire language, and then they provide supports at their sites that are very specific. I'd like to end with this thought of the reclassification timeline and that the data will look different. So as Kathy Bauer mentioned, we're in the gray, meaning baseline, no finalized data, but we did try to give you some numbers of being at 41% at the highest levels. Do remember, though, we've only had a first administration last spring. So if those numbers are inflated, this is the time that the state might, as we've seen before, right, with transition from CST to the SBAC, that they may change some of the questions there and we may see rigor changes. We're not sure, but we're anticipating that in year 2. So if the scores look different, it may not mean the work's not being done at sites. It could mean that there's a year 2 adjustment that we know and can anticipate that may happen, and we're not sure what the result will be. The other piece of the impact of the timeline and only having one administration is that no longer do we have 2 reclassification ceremonies that usually net us almost 300 students a year. Last year, we had a little over 290 reclassify. We will have 1 opportunity this year because the exam is only given in the spring, right? And we use the data from the prior exam, and we're probably going to be a little under 200. So that doesn't mean that we're reclassifying fewer students. It means that that opportunity has been delimited by the timeline in this transition period. And finally, we're really excited about our second LPAC administration this March. Again, this will be the time to show what our students know, but also the efforts that the sites are making and a full year almost of instruction and support to English learners rather than them being tested in the fall after a very hot summer and maybe cooler brains. Okay, what are we doing at the elementary level? We had a really successful summer program, taking a look at some of the practices that we believe we want to replicate. We are still going to work on that and identify and talk with and connect with our champions, those 12 champions we discussed before, as far as our teachers who taught during the summer of 2018. We are continuing with our English 3D curriculum. I think some board members may have seen Kate Constella presenting at some of the CSBA conferences and some of her work. And I just want to commend the work of my predecessor, Phyllis Rogers. She brought English 3D on board right at the onset. So we're really excited to continue to work that piece out. And we're grateful and happy for the elementary principals who've been courageous to want to pilot that and try it at their sites. It was originally a middle school curriculum with more emphasis on highly engaged in materials and great stories, but more writing, which we also have talked about as a concern and focus. And again, just rounding that out with professional development opportunities. We had one this afternoon with Ms. Zion. Again, the teachers have been great. What we've seen this year is we would like to see more teachers, right, as always, but they have long days. But we are noticing that there's a wide variety of sites coming to learn more strategies to help the students in their classrooms. At the middle schools, there's still much work to be done, as noted by Ms. Bauer, but we have moved along with our Achievement for Language Learners. A highlight of that program is it's a summer program, but all throughout the year, the parents meet with district office staff, the summer teachers, and their current administration to follow through with their yearly goals and help them move towards reclassification. And as you can see, we continue with the English 3D curriculum and professional development and teacher capacity, if I cannot say it enough, is really key to improvement in helping our students. Proud to present my colleague, Tara.
Thank you. Much shorter, so I'm going to move this down. So what Carmen talked to us about, having our students actively engaged in class every day, and Heidi talked about, student interaction, engagement, and academic language certainly has an impact on our academic indicators. So all of this work obviously comes very much together full circle. And what I have here for you is just a highlight of the way we monitor our progress toward these academic indicators all year long. We can't wait for SBAC results to come out at the end of the year. We need to make sure we are very closely monitoring the progress of our students and that schools are working continuously to improve outcomes along the way. And so you can see these are our results from trimester 1 assessments, comparing last year's results to this year's. And you can see we have some nice gains in the green, and we have a few areas of struggle in the red. In language arts, the same is true in math. But the great news is when we have this information in trimester 1 back in November when our students took this test, our schools were able to jump into high gear very quickly, analyze the results of their assessments, and make some instructional changes right away. Our elementary math coach jumped right on into those 4th and 5th grade classrooms to really help with math strategies and make some changes. So we're looking very forward to trimester 2 results in February to see how we're growing and gaining, and then continue to make those great changes in instruction along the way. Not only do we progress monitor, but we know that the more we provide professional development to adults, the more they can impact the children in the classrooms. And so we continue our work with professional development as a district. Our principals have monthly PD at our leadership team meetings, this year focused around alignment within our district. We also last year convened a professional development committee for teachers. We had teachers from throughout the district meet with me, and we talked about what are the needs that all of the teachers have. And together we developed a survey that was sent out to the entire district. Teachers responded back, and we created the professional development plan. And so it allowed teachers to have optional professional learning opportunities throughout the summer and throughout the course of the year after school on a wide range of subjects that they had picked out as being needs that they had. These professional learning opportunities were created in sessions because we feel like when we offer a one-shot professional learning opportunity, maybe it doesn't really stick, but if we can provide a whole series and have multiple opportunities to learn and grow, it will be more impactful. And so teachers can come to all of the series or they can attend one or two pieces of it depending on what they need or are able to attend. So you can see some of the options that we have. Of course, we have the required professional learning for the whole district, which is continuing the focus in SIOP. But then we also have these variety of opportunities. Some of our most attended, I think, are the English learner support strategies. We have a lot of teachers coming to those. Our new teachers participated at a very high rate in the new Eureka math training for new teachers and in the SIOP strategies for new teachers so they could be caught up to speed and pick up where we left off with everybody else. And the other trainings in math and language arts and social studies and science have been attended at different rates, but certainly offered and really well developed for teachers. In addition to the regular district PD and the optional professional learning, teachers also have 2 release days every year in which they can work with their instructional coaches to have professional learning and planning instruction for students based on data. We also have, the instructional coaches impact our teachers and are able to go in and model lessons and work directly with teachers, but they need professional learning too. And so at our monthly coaches meetings, our coaches have been receiving training in best practices in RTI and how to support teachers, assessment and data, how to use that data to impact instruction in the classroom, of course, ongoing PD with curriculum instruction and supporting SIOP. We have math training coming up for our coaches next month, which will be, I'm sure, fabulously exciting. And then, of course, we've spoken to you in the past about the middle school work with the ELA pacing, and our instructional coaches and language arts teachers at the middle school have done some great work, really looking at standards and instruction and collaborating across town to make sure that we have some really well-developed plans in place for all of our ELA classes. And of course, we have our principals getting professional learning, our teachers getting support, and we can't forget about our students. And so some of the things we've done this year to provide the extra support for our students is the new schedule at the middle school. It's really exciting to see students, every student, having an elective option. It's a really positive aspect for children, and I think it makes a really productive difference in their day. They also all have the opportunity to have response to instruction out our middle schools, really helping to fill in the gaps for our students who struggle, but also offering some enrichment and different opportunities for our students who are excelling. And so that's been a really fabulous addition to our middle school schedule. In addition, at our middle schools, we've got our co-teaching classes, which is really, we really hope to see the impact for students with disabilities with that change in learning environment for our students. Our response to instruction classes at our elementary schools have continued to grow and develop, which is really exciting to see. And then, our SIOP has been really fantastic. It was great to see all teachers on Monday continuing the work with SIOP instruction. All right, now that I've spoken so quickly, we're going to talk about a few next steps. We have all of this data, we've all got our plans in place, and we really want to make sure that not only our board is informed, but all of our school communities are too. And so all of our principals will be sharing their dashboard information with their community, with their teachers, their ELACs, their school site councils, to make sure that they are being very clear and transparent with their data and having some great action steps to take. Along with that comes their site plans that, of course, are going to be continually reviewed and revised as needed. That's a beautiful part of the work of our district is the ability for everybody to really analyze what's going on, what's going well, what needs to be adjusted, and make those changes along the way. We will continue to progress monitor all of the different initiatives that we have to make sure that our students get the very best every day. And it's really important for us too to get feedback from all of our stakeholders. And so, we've had our climate survey results. Climate surveys were done in November, and then our LCAP surveys will be going out later this year too, so that we can continue to collect feedback from every group, our students, our parents, and our teachers, to make sure that we really plan effectively for the upcoming year. I get to reconvene our professional development committee, I think in the next month, so that we can revise our plans for the upcoming year for teachers and really provide more fantastic learning opportunities for them. And then, of course, we'll continue our work with you to really focus with the board to make budgetary decisions and really continue to do great things for all children in our district in the upcoming year. All right, and I'm gonna, I think, turn it over to you and bring Kathy back to answer any of your questions. Thank you.
So we're all here for questions because this covers so many different departments, and most of the principals are here as well, and they can answer any questions that you may have. So we are ready for you.
Trustees, are there any questions?
Oh, yeah, I have questions. All right, Ms. Miller. How are you?
I'm great, thank you. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
Ms. Tabitha Miller from Mistral is at the podium for those viewing us tonight. So I have a question. So I saw in the presentation that for 2 years in a row, there were SED students at Mistral that have not made any progress. I have a simple question. Is that SED category all inclusive of all SED students in the school itself, or is it focusing primarily on certain grade levels?
Right, in the school, yes.
Do we have any idea what's going on?
Well,
It's a tough spot because you weren't there last year. But
so what is going on with SED students, why they're not able to succeed?
Yes.
In comparison to their peers?
Yes.
That is kind of a loaded question, but it has to do, there are a variety of factors I think that we've found. The students are not coming in with the knowledge that they need, with the preparation that they need. And so that's an area where we need to focus. Once students are enrolled in school and begin the process of learning, if they're already behind and then we are having trouble getting help at home, that process is made worse. So by the fact that they're behind. SED also can include English learners. It can also include Hispanic students. I mean, so there are just a variety of factors that are going to play into why socioeconomically disadvantaged students would be at obviously a disadvantage academically.
Okay. And based on your limited experience so far right now, what do you see that's actually working right now? Can you share any of that type of
So we
insight?
have some teachers that do home visits. We have, and they do it with SED students as well as other students who need some attention, some time with the teacher, that kind of thing, a special relationship with the teacher. We have a lot of teachers who are building relationships. Okay. And who are building relationships with their students. We're keeping an eye on those students. We're working with the at-risk coordinator, at-risk supervisor, to make sure that he has a relationship with those students. We're calling parents when students are showing up late or they're, if they're not showing up for, let's say, Lexia practice after school or math practice after school. We have teachers who kind of say, come meet me in the morning and do your homework next to me. I mean, they're just a variety of things that teachers are doing that our SCEF is working on. She gives out resources to families. We all collaborate, and so we throw as many resources at our students as we can. And so we're seeing progress little by little.
Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
So, yeah. No, okay. So here's my question. The larger picture to this is the bullet point that concerns me the most is work with Board of Trustees to determine needs and wants and make budgetary decisions for the 1920 and beyond. What I'm trying to get at is seeing that we're investing so much money as it is already with certain things that we're implementing, like PSYOP, or after-school tutorials, or our SCAFs, intervention officers. In the end, it's going to come down to a budgetary decision as to what's most effective, right?
Yes.
Not just at Mistral, but at other places as well.
Across the board.
Right. And so proportional cuts is going to be interesting to look at to see how all this is going to be affected. So my question for you is this. When you see this type of scoring still subpar, in my opinion, for not just English language learners, but also students with disabilities, what's the plan for the students with disabilities? I see something of a plan here for English language learners, and I see that we'll have to modify it and that we have to be patient with PSYOP and that implementation. I want everything now, not later. But with students with disabilities, I haven't seen anything, and with all due respect. And then our director that was here for about a year or so, I need to see something, because right now I'm losing hope on that front. And I don't want to be in that perspective, because pretty much I like to do the perspective of it's me against the world and I don't care, we'll get this done. But if I don't have that anchor behind me or that steam behind me that says we can do this, I get nervous. And right now I'm nervous.
I understand. So I can tell you at the middle school, this is the first year of co-teaching, which is a completely new support for students with disabilities. So our students now who have disabilities that are in general education classrooms in our middle schools have 2 teachers in their classroom for both language arts and math. And the goal behind that strategy is to make sure that students not only get the content, but they also get the differentiation and the extra support. So that has already been put in place, and that was based on what was coming, but we're not going to see results from that right now, but it's implemented this year. So there is that happening. The other piece that I actually spent an entire day with our special education team in December, and we're looking at a variety of options of what we're going to do at the elementary level. Is it going to be a similar co-teaching model? The team has gone and looked at a learning center model, which is happening in other districts. And so we're actually in process of looking at different ways of changing our elementary system to be more supportive for our students with disabilities. So while you may not see it in practice right now, it is happening, and it is definitely happening with urgency.
Okay.
The other thing happening, just so you know, the county has a special education task force. And so Ms. Mays is part of that task force, and this is a big initiative through Santa Clara County to look at improving best practices for students with disabilities.
Okay, and I have one final question, Madam President, and that would be to the team. With the situation that we have at, for example, what we talked about with Ms. Miller a little while ago, with all these resources being devoted to parents, to families, because we notice that there's a need for parental participation in the educational expansion of the child's mindset and growth. If that's not working now there, and that's an issue at other school sites, what do you suggest we do? How do we look at that issue? Because if in the end we still devote that time and that energy to try and help to get whatever we can get out of that relationship, is that really a success? Is that a work in progress? Or does it just come down to you do as much as you can with what you have at the time, but in the end, it's not that the school district's not doing enough. It could be now that perhaps the family situation is really the driving force behind either success or failure of the student. How do you manage that?
You know, I'll have to say, I think that our engagement facilitators are at risk, and working with our families is hugely important because we do want them engaged. But I think we have to remember that the true work happens between 8 o'clock and 3 o'clock while the students are here at school. And to get the most bang for our buck, especially for our students that may not come in with the same experiences, the same background, have the same experiences, we need to find ways to put that into our school day and give students programs within our school day that are going to help them improve, along with the other pieces that you talked about. How are we supporting families? How are we getting families engaged? We want them to understand what's going on, but we also have to have rich programs at our sites. And I think we've taken a step in the right direction with our response to instruction program that's continuing to improve. And I think by balancing this idea of offering really engaging opportunities for kids that make them want to be at school, and then also providing the right supports and enrichment, we're going to get where we need to go. It's just not going to happen overnight.
Okay.
I hope that answered your question.
No, it does to a point, because eventually once we come down to the budget, all those things that we just talked about right now, that's going to be affected. And so whatever progress we think we're making now, I'm hoping we push forward. I don't think so. I don't think we will if we have budgetary cuts, if we have to look into the SCAFs or the intervention risk officers. If we're looking at budget cuts with them already and trying to problem solve this ahead of time without making anything official, but we spoke about that the previous meeting, that doesn't give me that much hope for the future, to be honest with you. So I look forward to working with everyone on those issues in the coming months. Thank you so much.
I actually had also wanted to ask, I know that the state or the county are going to come out with the list of schools where I had written down differentiated assistance from California later this month. I know there's a couple of places where you said we were stagnant for a couple of years or hadn't made progress for a couple of years. Are we anticipating receiving that in any of these areas, or is it just, who knows, we'll wait and see?
I'll be really honest. So Ms. Victor and I spent some time with the accountability folks at the county because we were wanting to know this question ourselves. Our opinions differ. The county seems to think that we're not going to be eligible for differentiated assistance. Tara and I think that there are some cases we might be. I actually think our RED score for homeless students and our RED scores for students with disabilities may be those areas. Like I said before, we're not clear on how the systems are going to work. And so it's kind of a waiting game for the next week or so until we find out what's happening. I think the nice piece and the change is that the county is going to work with districts as a support as opposed to being punitive, because the goal is to improve, not to punish. And that's the big difference between the two systems, the system we have now and the system we had before.
Okay, well, we'll see what happens.
Yes.
Thanks.
I'm going to ask just a few questions to switch gears a bit about the professional development. I don't know that I'm fully up to speed on how all of that works. So excuse me if this is a little remedial, but it sounds like there's 2 release days required per year for teachers. And is that strictly for professional development or for those other variety of programs? And if that's the case, what are additional incentives that we could provide to offer more or get teachers to want to do it?
So the release days are provided 2 per year per teacher for planning. And they came into effect when we transitioned to the Common Core state standards, because teachers are here trying to learn all these new standards, especially at an elementary level when they're trying to learn new standards in all these different content areas. So we wanted them to have time to dig in and plan their lessons and work with their coach. So that's where that comes from. So it's really about lesson planning, looking at data, and making adjustments, really for their instruction, their instruction. And then we have our days that are designated for professional development that are required. And the focus for those has really been on SIOP the last 2 years. And then the professional development catalog that we had was developed by the committee, and those are all optional. And so we offer them in the summer and we offer them after school, and teachers can sign up and they can either get professional or credit, unit credit to move them on the salary schedule if they're attending a series, or they get paid hourly to attend.
And how are those communicated? Is that a site by site, or is there like an overarching human resources newsletter that handles that? And
we have an
provides
actual
information?
entire professional development catalog that we created in our department, and that goes out to every teacher.
Wonderful. Okay. Thank you.
Is that relatively new that we have that whole menu? I don't recall hearing about it, but I mean.
We've always offered a menu of professional development, but Ms. Victor really took it up last spring when she worked with the teachers and really developed. They did a great survey to pinpoint what teachers were looking for, and then created this whole catalog with sign-up sheets and forms, and they did a great job.
Thank you for doing that.
Are there any other questions? Devin?
Yes, I do have questions. I think there's something that's really tricky about the timing around all of this, because we're looking at data from last year and we're in January of this year, and then we're taking action on it in the next 5 months. And the next round of testing this is going to be based on is April. So really it's 3 months of data, 3 months of action from this point forward before the testing happens again. Do you anticipate that the timing cycle on this is going to continue annually, or is it going to shift?
I don't anticipate at this point. We've heard nothing that the state is planning to change how it releases the dashboard. which you're right, is not intuitive.
It's not ideal because I see our school site plans, the single plans for student success. I think I said that right. As the real leverage point for this. And it sounds like even when we work with the county or the state for targeted student support, they're actually trying to go over those site plans with the schools to improve student outcomes. So in the next steps, it talks about there will be a new state site plan format for the 1920 school year. I'm wondering if you could explain what that might be.
So I haven't seen it in its finalized form, but they've created a new template that really looks more similar to an LCAP. So it really it has overarching goals similar to what we have now, and action plans and budgetary pieces to it like we have, but it really looks more like the LCAP. And I think that they went to that to make it easier for stakeholders to understand and to see it, and it's a more streamlined format. They're actually finalizing that. We haven't seen the final template. So in January and February, we'll be having a variety of trainings at the county, both on the changes to the LCAP template and to the school plan template, because they will look different next year.
So something that I am curious about is when those changes happen. I think we have an opportunity, because I believe that the way we use those school site plans, the way we write our goals as a community, and then implement action towards those goals at the school site, I think that's the most direct consequence we have, using the data that we're given and the resources that we have, and making budgetary decisions as well. And right now, I'm very concerned with our vulnerable student populations. And in our current school site plans, we talk about, usually for goal 2, increasing the achievement and closing the achievement gap. We talk about long-term English learners, and we talk about RFEP students, and those are the 2 goals that we have. And those long-term English learner goals are students who are at risk of long-term English learners. Being a long-term English learner, that really comes down to 5th graders and maybe like 1 or 2 5th graders at each school site. And I mean, at a few school sites, it's a little bit more, but we're not talking about like 100 kids at each school site. We're talking about handfuls, dozens at most. And then the RFEP students looking at their ELA outcomes. So I'm hoping that as we move forward, when we have this new format, maybe we can explore ways of more specifically targeting goals for our students who are vulnerable in these subgroups: English learners, homeless students, socioeconomically disadvantaged students, very specifically in our site plans, in a way that we aren't quite there yet. I think the district's come a really long way in the last 4 years and has made a lot of progress on that. And I wasn't, I'm on the board now. I wasn't here when all the school site plans were done this fall. So I know I'm like way behind. All this work has already been done and it's already being implemented this year. But I think this speaks to, when we see these red areas and these orange areas, I think it speaks to how we write our goals and how we really implement things at our school sites.
And I think that if the plan mimics the LCAP, then sites will be forced to indicate, like we do on our LCAP, which subgroups that we're targeting each action for. And I think that will get to more of what you're looking for and what we're all looking for.
I mean, it's where we always want more money in the budget. We never want to have to cut budget. But I think it's also about how we're effectively using the energy and the resources and the human capital that we have. And that's about being strategic. And this is a way to be strategic.
But we've seen this in years past too. I mean, you may not have, but it's all there. And when you look at these reports, I've been looking at them now for 4 years, and the changes are so minute. You have all these resources going towards a success story or what have you, or intervention. And what you see, the consistency of those few students that are an issue at every single school site, all that they have in common is the inability to be able to have that focused plan for educational success for whatever reason. And it's that whatever reason that I think the school district sometimes can't tap into. I wish we could, but I don't think we can. And because that's a personalized issue. We don't know if there's problems there that deal with mental health. We don't know if they have students if there are students with disabilities. We don't know what's going on at home. The impact the last few years of possibly having their parents be deported, and the threat of ICE, and the social emotional disconnect that they have with community, because I don't see them on Latham Street walking around like we used to. I don't see them participating in after-school curricular activities like they used to. I don't see them at Target. I don't see them at Walmart. I don't see them at Ringstove Park. I don't. So when you look at all those things coming into play here, you're dealing with a lot of issues. And all those issues are things that sometimes we don't really have a say in. Symbolically, we can do everything we can with our resolutions, like we're not going to share any information regarding DACA students or if they're not their legal status, period. And that's something we can do throughout the state. But I think that the biggest disappointment that I see is that you see these site plans come to us, and Greg and I would talk about this as well as other trustees, in the most inopportune times, because the timing's so off. So in retrospect, it doesn't really make any sense. That to me is crazy. But because the state has us do it this way, you're always playing catch up. You're always playing catch up. And the moving target with the ELLs, they change. Because, I mean, we've seen the percentages go down as we're getting more gentrified. And that's a huge issue, because I'm looking at my statistics of the Latino students at 40-something%, and years past it were 60-something%. By next year, I expect to see maybe, I don't know, maybe 37%, 36. 2 years from now, I expect to see maybe 31%. 3 years from now, I expect to see maybe 28, 27, because of the high cost of living. So that's what breaks my heart, that you can invest so much time and money into a plan and be strategic about certain things. And that's why I asked about the higher level questions in terms of, and even Ms. Miller, what's working now? Because it doesn't seem like we have too much time to be able to hypothesize and throw more money at something when we're going to have less. And that's the crucial part to me, trying to get that distinction. So I'm glad you brought the issue of being strategic, but I think that's the whole point, that we've been trying to do that as best as we can now. I just don't think that it works.
So I'm anticipating that before we finalize the budget for next year, that we will at least have our second trimester of benchmark data to look at.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So that will help some in evaluating some of these issues.
It's like every year. You're right.
I mean,
Some.
I choose not to live in despair. I'd like to keep working.
Hey,
I just got here.
I appreciate that. I lived it. Believe me, I know the despair.
Yeah.
That's why I want everything now. I don't have time for tomorrow.
Nope.
Are there other questions from trustees? I know I had posed a question and it's already been answered in email, but I'll just bring it up now. Since we were only in third grade in my house, and I noticed across the board the fourth grade drop in math scores. So that's something that seems to affect all sites and all kids. So I thought it might be useful to bring that question back up and why we're seeing that and have it discussed in public.
Right, and we talked about this a little bit during our CAST report when we talked about this in the fall. And I think what happens is that the difference between math and language arts is language arts, you're spiraling your skills all the time. And in math, you're learning a discrete set of skills. So in third grade, you're learning how to multiply and divide, and you're starting some work with some fractions and understanding them. And if you don't know how to multiply and divide fluently, and now all of a sudden you're asked to do it with a fraction and a decimal, it's difficult. And so we have been kind of watching that trend, and hence why we added an elementary math coach this year, because we really felt like, and I've said this before, and it's nothing against any of our teachers, but our elementary teachers are asked to be experts in everything. They have to know how to teach deeply concepts in math. They have to understand science concepts. They have to know how to teach reading and literacy skills and writing skills. And they have to do all of these pieces. And that's a lot to ask. And we're asking them to do it at a critical junction when kids are building skills that are going to be really essential for them in middle school. And so we're trying to improve not only instructional practices at our elementary level for our students so that we don't see this dip at fourth grade.
Right. Thank you.
So finally, thank you so much for your help. But I find this also interesting because we can agree to disagree, but in the end, because we'll have a new partner with Bullis, I hope they're watching this, and I hope they look at the reports and they look at the school site plans, and I dare them to do better. That's all I got to say.
Any other questions or comments from the trustees on the dashboard? Okay. All right, thank you, team, everybody.
Did you ask for community comment?
I didn't. Are there any community comments on this item? Okay, seeing as there are none, we'll move on to item 10D, safety in our schools.
Any chance of taking a quick break?
Oh, sure. Okay, well, 5
Do
minutes?
other people?
10
Yes.
minutes.
10-minute break? Okay. 8 minutes.
Thank you. There you go. That's how you do it, Tamara.
I could have done 7.5. Hey, Rich.
Hey, man, that's not
I gotta see the shoes. I didn't see them. I didn't get to see the shoes.
Hey, Mr. Tanner.
So, I have always been confused about how the enrollment process really works. Is there some time that I can come and sit down with some of the convenience to have that explained?
I would be happy to do that. Can I have,
Anytime.
I can have Jane, my admin, make it for
That'd be
you and
great.
I. Like a Friday's really good for me, because the week is winding down.
Pretty much anytime.
I can tell you how we do it and what laws we have to follow and all that fun stuff.
I mean, I talk to an awful lot of people, and I get questions about how enrollment works all the time. And I'm saying, okay, these are the things that I kind of know are true, and these are the things I'm guessing. I can't really.
And I can tell you what system we use. We had to drop school because the data was so corrupted that it was just not working for us as far as. But I can tell you how we have to follow it. And how we have to, you know, deal with that. Yeah.
I'll shoot you an email. And
Send me an
then-
email.
Okay. For you about a question that you asked of the Bolus people. Somewhere in that 645-page petition of theirs, you spotted something, and I'm trying to remember the exact term, that was like sole governance or sole something or other authority or whatever.
That doesn't
So
sound familiar.
it was something about. It seemed like you were saying that this. Yeah.
So a couple of them we stronger than Tacoma, but they're pretty good. I think they're good. Yeah. Okay, perfect. I would love it. It's Monday at 5:30. See you then.
Oh, and I meant to tell you also, I'm sorry, you were running out. I love that Yosemite card. I've got it up in my office. And I was going to write you a note and I didn't, but I love the kids. Exactly. Please. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Happy New Year.
Go next. I know, but he's always, it's never late. Absolutely. Yeah, I'd love to see you. Love to see you.
They'll be short. Trust me. They will not be not gonna say it.
I got 45 minutes. An hour drive from here. Still, yeah.
Okay, at 9:02, we'll call the meeting of the Mountain View Wisdom Board of Trustees back to order. And we have the last item on the agenda to discuss, which is safety in our schools. And we have Ms. Lilga presenting.
Thank you. Dr. Rudolph really wanted to be here to present this, but he can't be. And since I do a lot of work on safety, I think I can answer questions that you might have. So we'll go through it. One of the things we realized in spring when we did the town hall on safety is that we don't communicate as well as we could about what we do for safety in our schools. So this is a start on that. And obviously, part of our values and beliefs and strategic plan is having a safe school. Students learn better if their school is safe. So if you look at active shooter incidents, this is through FBI and Department of Justice. They did a report recently as a result of the Parkland and Santa Fe shootings, and they partnered to examine the incidents of targeted violence. So this is between 2000 and 2013. There were 160 identified active shooter incidents. And I actually just saw the newest report from 2017. It's now 250, which is steadily increasing every year. So that's 6.4 incidents per year in 2000 to 2007, 2007 to 2013, 16.4 incidents per year. And unfortunately, the casualties keep going up as well. So in the 63 events where they could determine the duration of the event, 44 of the incidents lasted less than 5 minutes. And of those 44, 23 lasted less than 2 minutes. So they're over very quickly, usually. Educational environments are identified as the second largest location grouping. They are about 20% of the active shooter events. So they occur on the school grounds. 57 individuals killed, 60 individuals wounded. 5 events occurred in middle school. So it does happen even in middle schools. It's not just high school. And 4 events happened in an elementary school. Sandy Hook is probably the best known. And 2 incidents occurred at a school board meeting. Hopefully that's something that we never have happen here. Characteristics are pretty similar. The shooter chose to act alone. They generally showed no pattern for ages. 85% of the shooters were students or former students, and only 6 were female. And the Secret Service says there's no profile of a student attacker. They don't necessarily have the same demographics. So we need to have a comprehensive approach to physical security, emergency management, and violence prevention. So here's kind of what we do. Each of our schools has their state-mandated SB 187 plan. The district office has one, and schools update them yearly. We have an infectious disease and pandemic response plan. It was done in conjunction with the county after the H1N1 flu several years ago. We have an emergency plan that consists of emergency actions, emergency responses, and a crisis communication plan. They're all published on the district's website, and they're on the intranet, so anybody can see what's on them. So for prevention, we have CHAC on all of our sites. We have guidance counselors, Project Cornerstone, PBIS, Restorative Justice, Uplift Services. We have internet filters so we can see what students are looking at on the internet. We have district and site safety committees, which we're going to be starting in the next few months. We'll be establishing threat assessment teams that will be looking at behavior that may be indicative that something could potentially happen. And an annual building checks also to check for physical security. So some of the trainings that we provide, every year we do some incident command training. That's what we use for our emergency drill. We do an annual emergency drill in October. Schools do monthly fire drills. We do annual training for emergency radio operators that we use during the drill. And the last few years we've done run, hide, and defend. All staff are trained annually. This is a countywide protocol that's recommended by the Santa Clara County Police Chiefs Association. So as we said, we do monthly fire drills. We have radio testing, the annual exercise drill, and this year for the first time we're going to do a run, hide, and defend drill in middle schools in early February. So some of our new approaches will be developing those student assessment teams, as I mentioned, at each site and each department. We're doing a see something, say something campaign. So we've got some anonymous forms. We've already set up an email so people can email tips. And we also have a tip line. Those are both monitored by our receptionist on a daily basis. And we're also exploring an emergency notification system that's similar to the presidential notification system. It would be something where anyone in a school site could let other people know that an event is happening, and it would go out to all the laptops in the area. You can set to which one it goes to. We thought we had one picked out, and then we discovered that it really sucks up memory, and so it sucks up battery power, and so we were looking at other ones. So John Aker and I have been working on that, trying to find one, but it would be great because then everybody on the school site can know immediately if there's something going on. And apparently my battery is dead.
Yeah,
would you please? Is that the last slide?
Yeah.
I thought it was.
Yeah.
I thought it was, yeah. So I promised I'd be quick. Happy to answer any questions that you have. I do work on this a lot, so I should be able to answer questions if you have them.
Yeah, I'm curious what specific groups are going to be included in the site level safety assessment teams? So those SAT groups.
We're still working on it. Probably it'll be people like counselors, principals. I don't think we can have parents on it because they will be looking at potential problems. And I think that there's an issue with confidentiality on that. So we're still kind of exploring that.
Okay, and after we do this first time testing of the run, hide, defend in middle schools, is there any talk about possibly doing something similar at the elementary schools?
I don't know yet if we're going to run a drill. Mountain View Police Department that I work with very closely is very conservative about these kind of things. So we thought we'd kind of test it out at middle school, see how it's received. And one of the reasons we're doing it at the middle schools because when we did the survey in the spring, the middle school students said that they wanted the training very overwhelmingly. Parents were not so hot on it, but the students want it. So we're going to give it a try. I actually recently just found a video that's appropriate for elementary kids, and it does it in a very non-threatening way. So we'll probably roll that out to the elementary schools after we do this drill at the middle schools.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Ms. Loga, I have a question. So the See Something, Say Something campaign, will we also be recruiting our friends that do GMS TV and Crittenden TV in the mornings to help us spread the word out to the school community itself?
Yes, absolutely.
We had the safety forum last spring. The teachers were interested in getting more training, or teachers and staff. Are we taking steps to provide additional training for teachers as well?
We are, although time to make that happen is really tough. So every staff member receives the Run, Hide, and Defend training every year now. That's just a requirement that we do. Trying to do more has to be kind of optional for the other things because there's so much professional development that already goes on. So we do some training in the past years. I've done some for certain positions on the incident command tree, so planning chief or communications or something like that. And I use my emergency prep budget to pay people for an hour, and we do it in little hour increments.
Thanks. I just remembered that was one of the feedback pieces that we got.
Absolutely.
From that session. So thank you.
So I have a few comments. Ms. Loga and I have talked about this a little bit. And so I shared with her, and I had sent out to everybody that AXA, the organization for superintendents, high-level administrators, recently did a webinar on school safety, and it covered, had similar information to what you're presenting, but a few other things that they touched on that I think are worth thinking about. So one of them is, just like Ms. Blakely and Ms. Wilson were talking about training for staff and for students. They said the same thing that was said at our forum last year, which is the best training and the most recommended training is deep, high quality training for adults. And if adults are inculcated with what to do and how to do it, then that's most effective. Another thing, and it's so striking to me, you said this, these incidents are over with in a few minutes or a few seconds. And, and that's why this kind of training needs to become nearly automatic. And another thing in this training, it said that something that's very effective is to have a point person, many point people on campus who can make a decision immediately. They don't need to check with anybody. So the example they gave, they talked about a real world example that happened in California. A school secretary saw a shooter start moving across the property, and that school secretary was empowered through her training to just act on it right then. She didn't need to ask the principal or anything like that. And another thing I want to say, which is, we often, and you gave us the statistics on this, we think about student shooters or, disaffected students, but sometimes they're adults. And, we read these stories, and the story, that they we're talking about in the AXA training, it's some angry ex-husband of somebody, that kind of thing. So, somebody that you wouldn't really understand or anticipate, you couldn't plan for this, but in this one, this guy drove his truck through the gate, and so, and that gets back to the importance of that, just really well-trained adults. So I am so glad that you and Dr. Rudolph, took it upon yourselves to put together this presentation, and that, you are taking this very seriously on behalf of our school district.
Thank you. I have 3 first responders in my family, so it's kind of in my blood, I think, and it's something that I'm really passionate about. So it's one of those other duties is assigned, you know, kind of down there, but I really enjoy it. I like it. So, and it's very important. So we do, through our Run, Hide, Defend training, empower all of our staff members to be able to make a decision about what they need to do if there's something on our campuses. And what we're telling the students will be, you need to listen to the adult staff members. We don't want the kids deciding what they're going to do. So that's the biggest takeaway for them, is listen to your adult staff members. And once we get that system in place, then anybody who presses this button that says, you know, we've got a problem, obviously they're empowered to do that, and it'll make it a lot faster for us to get the word out.
And I do want to say one more thing, because I don't know if everybody knows this. So I've been around for a long time, so I know this, and I'm going to say this about you, Ms. Lilga, which is, you've been a leader in the county about this. You were ahead of the county on all of this school safety stuff for a couple years. So I really admire the work that you've been doing.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Well, you know what? With all due respect, I also admire Gary Weasley, because I think Gary was in his emails about this same issue last year, the year before that. And I'm glad that we're taking action on this. Thank you for your help.
You're welcome.
Thank you for all you're doing to try to keep our kids safe.
You're welcome.
I do have a question. Sorry. So looking at the characteristics of the perpetrators, and we don't see age characteristics. My understanding was that there does seem to be a predominance of people who may have been involved in domestic abuse or spousal abuse or have restraining orders, that there are some flags that right now don't prevent people from purchasing a weapon, but do end up being tied to a lot of the people who are perpetrating these incidents. And in my mind, that also speaks to, when we talk about educating adults, educating parents and families as well, or providing resources around information that they can use to watch for, people in the community who might need extra support or learn about this.
Right.
So I don't know if there's anything we can do around that, or if there are any programs that already exist or organizations we could talk to about that.
I don't know if there's any current programs. I know that's one thing that Dr. Rudolph wanted to talk to CHAC about in particular, was that mental health issue. They kind of backed off a little bit on it when we first talked, so we need to go back at it again. But I think that's a big thing, is making sure that mental health training or ability is there. As part of the Run, Hide, Defend training too, there is a couple of slides where we talk about some red flag behaviors, as they're called, so that people are kind of aware of what to look for, because sometimes they're actually pretty subtle. But if it's a change for a person, you need to be aware of that. So yeah, we definitely need to get the mental health.
And that could also open up possibilities of a partnership with the police department, since they have more access to local programs, nonprofits within the county, within the state, within the region, where they could possibly provide that type of assistance for parents and adults in general.
Right. And I really need to give a shout out to Mountain View Police Department. They've been very supportive in this. I meet with them. When we first did Run, Hide, Defend, they had police officers at every training for 2 years. And we did, 35 or 40 trainings in the first 2 years. And there was a police officer there every time, and they've continued to do that. So we are very grateful that we have their support on this.
Thank you for your
I
work
do
on
want to
this.
bring up too, to say more about your comments about mental health. Whoa. All right.
Where's the sensor at? I don't know.
It's taking a long time. There we go. The importance of that see something, say something strategy. There are, off the top of my head, just in the last 10 seconds, I thought about 3 school shooting incidents in the last, 10 years where they didn't have any of those characteristics. And it was, somebody kind of maybe thought, something is a little off with this kid, but they weren't from abused homes. They weren't, so I think helping to encourage that see something, say something, be really useful.
I just got a report from the Secret Service actually, and I think it was 90% of these incidents, somebody knew something and maybe could have prevented if they had said something. That's an astounding statistic.
Any more questions or comments from the trustees? Any questions from members of the public or comments? Thank you, Ms. Lilga. And seeing as we've already gone over board updates, do we have any items for future board agendas? No? And we have the future board meeting dates listed here and the subject matter that we'll be covering. And I guess with that, at 9:20 p.m., I will conclude the meeting of the Mountain View Wisdom Board of Trustees.
Thank you.
Thank you.
What's that?